This week on The Short Game, we spoil the secret of good old Christmas duck.
Welcome to The Short Game. This is the inaugural episode of The Short Game, a podcast celebration of video game storytelling and craft for people who have, like, jobs and stuff. I am your host. Can I say host? Is that a thing? Am I a host?
You're hosting
guys.
me.
I'm a host. Am I a host?
Congratulations.
All right, I'm going to go with host because, no one else has taken that job yet. I'm your host. I'm Raygan Kelly. I am the pilot of this Malaysian plane. Is that too soon? Oh,
too soon, man.
Yeah.
Dude, they haven't even found it yet.
Oh, you're right. I really shouldn't have gone there. And I will be joined this week, or episode, by my brother, Shane Kelly.
That's me, Shane Kelly.
Describe yourself, Shane.
I would say that I am, in many ways, similar to you, Raygan, as we are identical twins.
We have that in common. And we've got one third wheel here with us today, Nate Heininger. Describe
Hello,
yourself,
everybody.
Nate.
I don't look anything like you two. I am working on a beard. That's what I got going.
Actually. It's actually kind of embarrassing. We all three are.
Are we all three neckbeards at this point?
Yeah.
No, clean. I have cleaned that.
You have a clean beard.
My neck grows at a rate of at least 3 times the rest of my face. So that is something I have to keep on top of pretty frequently.
You're a cross to bear.
Yep. It's a hard life.
Well, I'm glad that we've all three been able to get together for this, as this is the inaugural episode of The Short Game, a podcast that I've been really wanting to take a crack at for a little while now. So the concept of the show, The Short Game, it came to me a little while ago when I've been playing a lot of games from things like the Humble Bundle and Steam sales, and I've got this Steam library that's just overflowing with games. And recently, I just decided I needed to cut through some of that, and I started trying to go through and play the shortest ones first. And I found that a lot of the shortest games in the Steam library, it's actually, first of all, really hard to kind of figure out which games are short, because length is such a selling point with games these days. You know, they all kind of want you to see them as an epic experience, something that's going to take you 40 hours to complete, something that's going to own your life for the next 2 weeks or
Absolutely.
however
I mean,
long.
you usually hear that very early on in the pitching when someone's telling you about a new game. They're like, "Oh man, it's apparently like 45 hours at least. Like,
Oh, definitely.
it's at least 50 hours, and that's only if you do the main quest."
They like to use the word deep.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if that really counts. Deep.
What is deep?
I don't know either.
But I think about games like Skyrim that I've invested just significant, chunks of my life into.
How many hours
And
are you at with Skyrim? Do you remember?
I never finished Skyrim, and that's
What?
the problem.
Okay,
I never
actually,
beat it.
Well, what do
I-
you mean by beat?
I never completed the main quest.
Yeah.
I felt completely fulfilled when I mastered the Mage's College quest. This is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but for me, that was the short version of Skyrim. I became Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, and I felt like I'd achieved all of my goals. I didn't really particularly care whether the dragons killed everybody.
I did complete the main quest of Skyrim, but honestly, the main quest of Skyrim is, 10% of the game, if that. I sunk a really enormous amount of time into Skyrim. And, I do feel that's a great game, and there's really a great place for games that have that length and that amount of playability. I went back and started a second character and played that again, and it really did own my life. It was the one game I played for a long time. But since then, I've kind of changed my tastes a little bit, and I've really started looking for games where I can dive into a game, experience everything that it has to offer, really experience the game, and not have to spend the rest of my life playing it. Something that then I can feel like, wow, that was a great experience, and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I've kind of started going through the same phase, and which is part of the reason why I was interested in this. I never have been too big into the long form RPGs. I played Skyrim, but kind of like Shane, I actually didn't go too far into it, though I did play Fallout New Vegas for a pretty extreme amount of time. But before those I was
Bethesda games, my friend.
Yeah,
they're so good.
Exactly. And I super enjoyed it, but before that I was actually more into online games. So I played World of Warcraft for a very long time, and I played EverQuest for a very long time.
Oh my god, really?
I was in the beta. I started EverQuest before the first expansion, all the way through into beta of World of Warcraft for like 5 years. Now, I haven't played Warcraft for like, I don't know, 3.5 years, but I spent the majority of my, time as a gamer playing 1 to 2 games, and it would be whatever massive online game I was playing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the appeal of these short games is exactly what you were saying. I can pick it up, I can play it, I can maybe beat it, or at least feel that I've been fulfilled relatively quickly, and I don't have to spend all day thinking about what, raid I'm going to go on or whatever for that one moment's time.
It's strange because it's, this length and, it makes sense from a video game historical perspective when buying a video game was an enormous financial investment. When I was a kid, if I bought a video game, that was probably the thing that I got to buy this year, and even just in flat costs, like adjusted for inflation. Like I was listening to a podcast recently about this was on Retronauts, and they were talking about some SNES games coming out late in the life of the SNES. And those games, and we're talking about in 1990s dollars, were like $90 games for one game.
Raygan and I, our original system that we really dove into and loved was the original 1989 Sega Genesis.
Oh my god, yes.
That was
original price, $190. You know what that would be in today's dollars? The system itself, $346.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the games with cartridges, they would always go for $40 to $60 and sometimes more, I think.
I vividly remember spending $70 on Sonic 3.
Wow.
Yep.
I also was
a Sega Genesis kid, so.
Really?
And
yep.
Compare the depth, quote unquote, we're talking about depth now, of something like Sonic 3 Sonic 3 the third iteration had pretty deep game. Look at Sonic 1. People were shelling out for Sonic 1, and it was not a very deep game. It's a great game, but compare it to a lot of the stuff you'd see on mobile platform today for $1. And I think you'll see, I think that really shows what the direction things are going in.
Mm-hmm. It was somewhere halfway between Flappy Bird and, I don't know, that Ocean Horn.
Don't you talk about Flappy Birds.
Well, those games, it was all a product of the economics of video games at that time, because making a video game involved not just paying a bunch of programmers to create something magical on a really limited system, but they were also working against the economics of a really bizarre licensing situation. You'd have to, if somebody wanted to create a video game, they were paying a large licensing fee to the original console creators, who are usually selling these consoles at an enormous financial loss. And then there was the cost of making cartridges. If you had to make a cartridge today to sell a video game, that would absolutely quadruple the cost of every video game. Cartridges are actually pretty damn expensive, that they require, making custom fabricated chips and soldering them to a PCB, and then you have to ship them all over the place. It's really a nightmare. So the amazing thing about the video game landscape today is that even on things like portable consoles, we've gotten to a point where we can get these downloadable games, and that lets us distribute them in ways that just make it so much easier to consume these little snack games, these small games. And you see that as the driving force of games on mobile. I think that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think we're going to be celebrating in our podcast here, these games that take that landscape and do the right thing with it. They make it a wonderful place to explore short narratives and gameplay ideas that might work really well in the small scale, but not on the epic scale of something like Skyrim. But they don't go towards that Flappy Bird, Angry Bird, the bird genre of mobile games. Anyway, I'm really excited about what I've been seeing in indie games lately, which is this sort of 1,000 blooming gardens of really amazing ideas. I know that's the fruitiest thing I've said on. That was so fruity. Excuse me.
Some purple prose, right?
Oh my God, you're right. I have that tendency to go that direction.
1,000 blooming gardens. No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Well,
isn't that something that like Mao said? Like, let 1,000.
Oh my God, I was quoting Mao. You're right.
That's the world I want to live in. Thank you. Yeah. Well, and it's definitely being embraced. With the Steam Greenlight program and other things like that.
Kickstarter is an amazing resource. So, all that stuff aside, I think aesthetically we have this conflict between the values that people put on entertainment in every other genre of entertainment. Things like novels, television shows, movies, all other artworks, and the values that they put on a video game. No one goes to a movie and says, guys, you've got to see this. It was 4 hours long.
Yeah.
No, or you don't go into a TV show and
there's
say.
There's definitely the exception. Like, there's movies like, your Seven Samurai or something like that. That's a super long movie that is critically acclaimed, but I've definitely walked out of movies thinking they were too long.
Yeah. Well, it's not critically acclaimed because it's long.
Exactly.
No, indeed.
Which is something I think Skyrim gets a lot of credit in games like that just because it's long.
Mm-hmm.
Not even necessarily good, but look how much time you can spend playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of content in that book was just incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even read all the side chapters.
I agree.
With almost everything else, it works against it as far as I'm concerned. Even TV shows. I just finished watching True Detective, and holy crap, that show was fantastic.
I have not watched the last episode.
Oh, no, we can't talk about it. Well, we shouldn't anyway, in case anybody listens who hasn't finished the show. If you are out there in the world, within the sound of my voice, and you haven't yet seen True Detective, you've got to see True Detective. It was so great. But leaving that alone, I thought that working at an 8-episode length rather than a 20 episode or 12 episode season or however long, God, if that had been any longer, I don't know if I would have liked it as much.
Yeah.
So with video games, I think that we have this totally opposite perspective on them, though. So many games, people think that the length of the game is somehow related to its value, and I think that actually incentivizes developers to make games worse. Somebody has a great idea for a game, it's really perfect as it is, and then the publishers tell them, well, can you throw something in to flesh it out and make it a little longer? And they add things like collectibles, or other things that sort of inflate the length of the game without actually adding anything to it. And I don't know of anyone. I do know some people who compulsively collect collectibles in games. People who got every Riddler trophy in the Arkham games and things like that. Did anybody here get all the Riddler trophies?
That stuff I could care less
I came
about.
pretty darn close in the first Batman game.
Really? Oh,
I did.
I could care less about that.
Me neither. In fact, as soon as I see those, as soon as I saw the Riddler trophies, I saw the first one and I was like, well, I'm never getting any more of those.
Yeah,
it's
unless
not
I
gonna
happen upon them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in some games, I thought in the first Batman game, Arkham Asylum, it was used well in that I gathered the ones that I came across, because I would spot them and they would occasionally just sort of challenge me to think about the level in a new way or try a new way of getting around an obstacle. I definitely didn't get them all, but in the more recent ones, I barely got any of them because it was a fetch quest, and I just absolutely hate it when I have to approach something in a way that I'm looking at a map to see, where are all the things that I have to run around and get? But I do want to say that in this episode, knowing what we're planning to discuss, having done my homework a little bit and read through these games, the games we're really looking at today are really focused around storytelling in a short period of time. But I do hope that in this show, we'll also talk about my favorite genre of short game at some point, which is the puzzle game.
I would love to do an episode on puzzle games. But I actually think that there's a distinction between a short game like the ones we're going to be discussing today and a game like a puzzle game that has a short session, but an open-ended, amount of replayability. Something like a fighting game could be considered a short game, but I think it's a different sort of game. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but puzzle games absolutely are a great example of something that lets you jump into a game, experience it, perhaps not entirely in full, but really get the feel of the entire experience and walk away satisfied within just a short period of time.
Yeah, well, it depends on the type of puzzle game as well, because there are definitely puzzle games with a narrative. I think Portal, obviously everybody's favorite game ever, is the perfect example
It's
of
a
a
wonderful
short
game.
with a good narrative that's pretty much just considered a puzzle game. So I think you can find those that fit both what we're trying to accomplish here. But for the most part, you're right in that puzzle games are just kind of a pick-up play, solve some puzzles, and put it back down.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think that there's a resurgence in a lot of these kinds of games of things that were classics in the early days of gaming, like puzzle and arcade elements. You look at the incredible popularity of the platform genre right now. If you go back a few years, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
especially in indie gaming.
Yeah, half the games that are on Steam or Humble Bundle are platformers. And I think that also has to do with ease of developmental tools. It's not too difficult to get your hands on a development environment that you can use to make a platformer relatively quickly. And so that's why you see all those relatively simply designed but interesting story or some single interesting concept that drives the platformer.
Mm-hmm. Platforms like Unity or the Steam. I'm sorry, what's Valve's engine called? The Source engine. Have done more for indie gaming and the cause of the, short, independently produced, complete game experience than anything else, really. I think the Unity engine, for all of its faults and quirks, is a wonderful thing to have happened to the gaming world. And actually, one of the games we're going to be talking about today, Gone Home, was created using Unity. The other, the Stanley Parable, was actually created using Valve's Source engine. It began as a mod on Half-Life.
A lot of popular games have stemmed from being mods of Half-Life, including mainstream games like Counter-Strike.
True. Well,
you might say that it has caused 100 flowers to bloom.
I don't think it'd be a stretch to say that.
All right. Well, with all of that exciting stuff happening, does anybody have anything up on the horizon that's interesting to them? Any games coming out soon or gaming news that seems interesting?
Well, you had asked me to prepare a game that I was excited about coming out.
Oh, make it sound like homework, why don't you?
Because it was terribly painstaking for me to come up with something. It was basically homework is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, the game that I was looking at is actually kind of falls into that weird middle ground of exactly what we were just talking about. Mm-hmm. It's one of my more favorite games that I've played over the last 2 years, which is Faster Than Light. Or FTL, as you'll see it through most places, where it kind of sits in that mold where it's really just a session, can be about a half hour to an hour. So again, don't know exactly where that falls in our world, but they announced an expansion for it, a free expansion that's going to very, very much open up the game even more.
I heard a little bit about that, but I'm not really sure what's actually coming to the game. I played a lot of FTL not when it first came out, excuse me. It was when it first hit the Humble Bundle.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God for the Humble Bundle.
Yeah, we've said Humble Bundle, I think at least 5 times at this point.
I know.
Already.
I think we ought to do a whole show just on the Humble Bundle someday. Like the next time that that there's a new Humble Bundle, we should do a whole. Sorry, I had a noise go off there. I should have muted these devices.
Yep.
Next time a Humble Bundle comes out, we should probably do a special. But anyway, that game came out on the Humble Bundle, and I thought, what the heck is this? And I wasn't sure if I was even going to be able to get into it. It seems, when you first look at that game, just kind of like a spreadsheet with sprite graphics.
Which is not that far from the truth in a way. But
It's really compelling, though, once you get into it.
It is, and that's where I'm torn, where I don't know if it falls perfectly into what we're talking about, because I actually spent, I think my Steam account says about 45 hours on this game.
That's impressive.
That goes exactly against what we're talking about.
I don't think so. I think that I don't think we need to be really prescriptivist about what our concept is here. I think a game like that 100% falls into our wheelhouse.
Okay, because I would play it about an hour at a time. I'd
Exactly.
do 1 or 2 runs, see how deep I could get, and then, be done with it. But they basically added more of everything. And this game was very good at balancing. So I think they should add a lot. It looks like they're going to add a lot without taking too much away from the base game. They're adding stuff like a cloning bay, the ability to hack the enemy ship, mind control units, all sorts of different possibilities.
Gosh. I'm worried that I'm going to return to that game and just never be able to extricate myself again. Oh, that game was so good.
Well, I actually I had a hard time really getting into that game, honestly. And I think part of it was that I primarily game on a desktop computer, and not on a laptop. And that's the kind of game that I kind of felt was like a lot of puzzle games or casual games. I don't say that with any malice. I actually think casual shouldn't be used as a pejorative with games. But anyway.
Filthy casuals.
I know. But I think it was the sort of game that I felt would be better played in a relaxed situation, maybe watching a movie or something like that.
That's why I'm really hoping that game comes out on a tablet.
Well, have we got news for you? That was about what I was going to say, was that I think I read that with that update, they're also doing an iPad version. Is that right, Nate?
Yep. They'll be launching at the same time.
Oh, you just made my day.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm very excited about it. They don't have a release date as of yet, but I've been following it pretty heavily. Pretty excited to try it out. And it's free, which I would pay for it, no problem. But I definitely appreciate it when a developer, will do something like that.
Adds content to a game that's been out so long and already has such an audience. Yeah, I really think that's awesome.
Yeah, because they could easily throw it up for $5, $10 and probably have just as many downloads as they will for having it free.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely appreciate that.
I particularly appreciate it in a situation like this where it's not even something where they are worried about fragmenting their player base. Something like a multiplayer game will often kind of have an incentive to do that, so they have a unified player base and they don't have to have like separate servers or all that. But a game like FTL, there's no fragmentation. There's nothing that would have at all prevented them from just handing that out, or that would have prevented them from charging for that. I think it's a really nice thing that they're doing that as a free DLC. And I will 100% buy that game a second time on the iPad when it comes out on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, my game that I am currently excited about, I've just downloaded. It's also an iPad game. And if you haven't played it, I encourage you to download and play it. This is not a new release, but it is a re-release. It's a remake of a game that I fell in love with when the iPhone App Store was new. And they've just created an updated version. This is a game called Eliss. E-L-I-S-S. And this was the game that for me first showed me what touchscreen gaming could really be like. It's a game with very abstract play. It's great for mobile because it's all a very short session game. And this new version is called Illis Infinite. I don't know if you pronounce the infinity sign on the name, but it's Illis with an infinity sign. The concept behind the game is kind of spacey looking, empty void. Circles will sort of appear in front of you of various sizes, and you move them around with your finger. You can put two of them together to merge them into a bigger circle, or you can take two fingers and spread them apart to split them in half in their size. And portals will also show up on the screen.
I remember this game. I've just looked this up. Yeah, that was a fantastic game. I remember playing
I don't think it got the press that it really deserved when it was even released in the first place.
I played an enormous amount of this on the iPhone 3G.
Yeah, I remember, right? But the new version has an infinite mode, and it has an all-new set of levels, I believe.
And it's universal for the iPad.
Yes, it is. So I gotta encourage anybody who likes puzzle games and interesting uses of multi-touch to definitely download this game. I have just...
It's a lot like, if anybody has seen or played the game Osmos, which is out on Steam and also on iPhone, iPad, on Android. I think Osmos ended up kind of getting a little more popularity than this game, and they have a similar kind of, Osmos is sort of like a game a lot like Illis, except that you're playing as a individual circle. I don't know. It's really hard to discuss without visuals.
Sure.
But...
Well, Osmos is a game in which it's a physics-based puzzler in which you're playing as like I always thought it was a microorganism.
Yeah, you're some sort of an amoeba or something, and you move around,
absorbing other objects,
ejecting small amounts of liquid from your body,
like...
which sounds way grosser than it actually is. And your goal was to eat objects smaller than you and avoid objects larger than you. And this game has some of the same aspects in that it's about having multiple different sizes of.
I wouldn't directly compare them, except that gameplay heavily involves circles.
So basically, it's Pac-Man.
I was just gonna say.
Yes.
All right. Well, actually, thank you for bringing this to my attention, because this looks like a lot of fun. I'm really gonna check this out.
Yeah, I have never heard of either of the games that you two are talking about, so I obviously have some downloading to do.
All right. Illis Infinity, out now on the App Store, $2.99. If that's not a sale price, then that'll probably be the price it's at. That's awesome. All right. Well, I have a couple of things I kind of wanted to talk about, as far as new and upcoming stuff. First, I guess, is just a quickie. Any of you guys played Titanfall yet?
No. I have a PlayStation 4. That is the decision I made. I do not have an Xbox One.
Yeah. Well, you've got a Windows PC, presumably. I mean,
yes.
You've got a laptop.
I have access to Windows. I don't play a whole lot of first-person shooters on my computer, though.
Mm-hmm.
So, that is actually you bringing that up is the first time that has crossed my mind of getting it on my computer.
Yeah, I've been considering it, but the only reason I bring it up here is that, it's all over the gaming press right now, and you can't walk 2 steps in the world without hearing someone talk about Titanfall right now. And it does have some things that are appealing to me. I haven't played a multiplayer online game of any kind in years at this point. Oh, well, I mean, that's a lie. I played some that were cooperative. I haven't played these sort of, massive team-based or squad-based or any other online game that wasn't basically a 2 to 4 player cooperative kind of thing. And I've got reasons for that, and that might be a topic for another time. But this has me somewhat tempted because of the kind of seems a little bit innovative combination of a campaign mode with a story-driven kind of thing. I don't know. I just wondered if either of you guys had any thoughts about the
No,
game.
I haven't. I haven't played it yet, but I am definitely interested. I don't have any problem with first-person shooters, other than that I'm really not very good at them. I really enjoy them. Campaign mode is fine, with modern first-person shooters, anybody can get through the campaign.
Mhm.
But I typically will, I play Battlefield 4 and I play online, and I really, really enjoy that game. I have a lot of fun playing it, but I am very bad. But to me, I kind of treat it's almost like a sandbox game where also everybody's trying to kill you. So I will play it, to fly the planes and the helicopters, and because of the physics of the game, you can pull off some pretty interesting stunts and stuff like that. But I'm not any good at it. So Titanfall is interesting to me only to kind of see what world they've created.
Mhm.
But if I play online, I am guaranteed to be a terrible player.
Yeah. Well,
I've
that
never been
actually
good
is
at 'em.
exactly the reason that I have for not playing these games lately, is that I think that the experience of playing online against other people is just, it gets to the point where it's so stressful that it's not even fun.
I don't know.
I'm not good at it, and
Yeah.
I get into a loop of just being killed over and over again, and at some point in the past, I don't even remember what game this might have been at, where I kind of rage quit the entire genre, but I'm wondering if maybe I shouldn't try that again and give it another go. And Titanfall seems like the kind of
Yep.
online
My
game
problem
that
with
might...
this kind of game is that I'm so good at it that it's not fair to the other
Yeah,
players, and
that's
so
fair.
I just
That's-
gave up on that.
That's nice of you to do that for us.
You're
Mhm.
welcome, everyone
Yeah.
who owns Halo.
It's interesting though, because I wasn't always that way. I played Counter-Strike back, to me it was its heyday, but maybe it's just because that's when I was playing it. But to those who played it, it was like right before the 1.6 update, so this was a while ago. And I played
Mhm.
that actually, competitively to a degree. I was in a league, or
Wow.
they called it clans, and I did some competitive stuff. Again, I wasn't like super good at it, but enough to compete. And then I played Team Fortress 2 for a while, but for some reason the huge ones where it's like 32 on 32, or just the bigger the map, the harder time I have playing it, or at least the harder time I have being good at it. I think I get too distracted because everything's so big.
Yeah. I've never actually played one that had that large of a number of
Yeah.
players.
Well, that's a recent development.
Yeah, I feel like that's really a big hole in my gaming knowledge, and I feel like I need to try something like Titanfall just to make sure that I'm not becoming an old man stuck in his ways. I want to make sure that when I make this show, the short game, that I'm celebrating something great and not just an old man standing being like, "Get off my lawn, you kids with your online MMOs and your BS
Thousands of flowers.
fours and your..." Yeah, exactly.
So, Raygan, tell me, is that your game for the week?
No,
'Cause
no.
I wouldn't think of that as a short game.
No, it's
I would think
probably
that's-
not. Well, each individual game of that might be very short, and I thought it might be something to chat about. But no, I was actually going to bring up another game that I'm pretty interested in. So I played Gone Home a little while back. It's one of the games that inspired this podcast, and I've been since then looking for, what can possibly follow that up. Because obviously, as we'll probably chat about once we get into the game, Gone Home is not a game that you're going to see a sequel for. Nobody, even its biggest fan is waiting for Gone Home 2.
Gone Home 2, Gone Homer.
Yeah.
Gone Home 2, like TOO, or
Gone Home 2, Gone Out.
Gone Home Again.
It's all about Caitlin.
Yes.
Once she's explored the house, she leaves to go get a pizza, and it's her trip to the pizza place. Now, but anyway, I've been looking forward to hopefully games taking this spirit and trying new things with it, exploring new directions with it. And I really felt like one of the things that's missing from Gone Home is another character to relate to. And so this game that isn't out yet, I'm really excited about. It's called Firewatch. Firewatch is a game that's going to be coming out sometime in 2015. It's only been recently announced. It's from a brand new development team called Camposanto. There's a couple of good articles about it. I'll paste them into the show notes. But long story short, it's a first-person game, kind of in a looking at screens of it. I feel like it has a similar play style to something like Gone Home. You're walking around in a first-person perspective, exploring an environment where you're the only human being around. In this case, you're a fire marshal, and the year is 1989, and you're doing a summer job.
What is it with these games in the 80s? Gone Home is in the 80s as well.
Is it?
Nope.
Yeah.
1995.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shane. God, get it together.
But there was a Trapper Keeper.
Yep. And
Shane,
if you remember, that's her sister's, and she says, "Oh man, she had that when she was 4," which would be the 80s.
get on the ball, Shane.
Hey,
So,
I just played this game, so like I was playing it when Raygan called me to start this. So,
well, this game, Firewatch, has a kind of a cool pedigree. I'm really excited about just the people that are putting it together. It's this new company, Camposanto, is sort of formed by some people that have been involved in really amazing games. The two leads for the company, I don't have their names here, worked on games like Mark of the Ninja, Brutal Legend, The Cave, which I haven't played, but on my list. BioShock 2.
I've been playing The Cave.
Oh, you have? You have to tell me about it later.
Okay.
And BioShock 2, and also The Walking Dead Season 1, which I also recently just finished, and it ripped my guts out and spread them all over the floor in a heaping pile of zombie food. It was a really emotional experience and really an amazing game. And this game has that kind of pedigree. It's also, as Mac nerds, all of us, I think, will all appreciate that it's also, I think it's just funded by or kind of an offshoot of Panic Software. Do you guys know Panic?
Makers of my favorite FTP client.
Yes. Makers of Transmit, the excellent FTP app that I use on a nearly daily basis, as well as a few other really great pieces of Mac software. Panic has been around for many years, making gorgeous, beautiful apps for Mac and iOS, and I'm just a huge fan of theirs on that front. But they are, I think, just funding, or they're somehow involved in this. Anyway, the game looks gorgeous. All the art looks like some kind of a beautiful poster. The environments look beautiful.
The epitome of design, the poster.
Shut your hole. When I say poster, I specifically mean, you know, the sort of like, I don't know the appropriate term for it. Those like, 4 or 5 tone posters that you get for,
I'm looking at a screenshot of it right now. It looks like
Explore beautiful Wyoming, and they have like a beautiful.
Looks like a 4-color print.
Thank you. It looks like a 4-color print, and a lot of the game, or at least the screenshots I've seen, and there are very few of them. There's almost nothing out about this game so far. It looked like that. But the plot of the game essentially is, and being a mystery, I think kind of like Gone Home, they don't give away very much about this yet, fortunately, but you're a guy, Henry, who's taken a job as a fire marshal in Wyoming, and it's a summer following a big fire. Everyone's kind of on edge because it's a hot summer, it's a dry summer, and you're in your tower watching for fires, and your only human contact is your boss, who's a woman named Delilah, who's in a tower off over across the horizon, and you speak to her on a handheld radio that you carry around. And there's sort of a relationship there. Anyway, I think it just looks like a really exciting game. It's a story of something weird happening, and that's pretty much all we know at this point. So, I'm looking forward to kind of taking that journey. I'm just really, really excited about that.
That's really interesting to me. I saw some of the screenshots from this game, and I guess I haven't watched any videos or trailers or anything like that.
There's almost nothing yet.
It looked, the art of it looked so, clean
like
and
nice.
Like
it belongs on a poster.
I assumed that it was going to be a 2D platform type game, but now you're telling me that it's actually a first person. So
it's a first person game.
Cell shaded or something like that.
No, actually, as far as I can tell, it's not cell shaded, but it does have a sort of an interesting color scheme. I'm not really sure how they're achieving it. Anyway,
I
looks
think they're
awesome.
using, like, pixels.
Yes. So I'm excited about that game. It's one of those things that I almost wish I hadn't heard about it yet, because it won't be out until sometime in 2015, which probably means it's going to be, November of 2015 for all I know, and who even knows. But I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye on this one.
Yeah, it looks pretty interesting.
Dear Katie, I'm sorry I can't be there to see you. I'm just sorry. But please, whatever you might find, don't tell Mom and Dad. I don't want them to know. I don't want anyone to know.
I'm really excited to talk about Gone Home. I think this is one of the... This is a game that I've really enjoyed it more than almost any other game I've played this last year. If I had a Game of the Year pick for 2013, which is when this was released, I think Gone Home would be the top of it. And actually, it's made a lot of lists. I was really surprised it's gotten the reception it's gotten. But it's also been kind of controversial. Some people haven't liked it so much. Some people go so far as to say this isn't a game, or, argue about it in other ways. I don't care. I don't care if it's a game. I don't care, about
You mean I'm not going to be able to scandalize you by saying this isn't a game?
If you say it's not a game, I will kick you off the show, but
There's your out, Shane. There's your
I'm
out.
out. I'm out,
All
guys.
right.
I don't think it's a game.
Alright, see you later. Bye, bro.
Alright, cool.
But, let's just talk first about describing the game for people who might not have played it. Does anybody want to kind of take point on that?
Well, I can, but I mean, I think you're passionate about it. I'd love to hear your take on it. You haven't finished the game, but what have you thought about? How would you describe the concept of the game as you've experienced it so far?
Oh, that's a good question. To me, it's played like a mystery novel almost, a first-person mystery, where you just show up at the front door of this house, and you have to get into the house. Like, there's minor puzzles involved, but not anything more complicated than finding the key that's under an ornament.
The Christmas duck.
Yeah, the Christmas duck, that's right.
Guys, I thought we said no spoilers. Now they all know that the keys are the Christmas duck.
Literally the first object I touched, so.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was going to say. I don't know if I got really lucky or what, but that was the first thing I did, was find the key. So.
Well, it's under a duck, so how do you miss the
true.
duck?
But that's what I mean. It's puzzles, kind of.
I hardly even think of this as having any puzzles.
Yeah.
I think the best way to describe the game is as just a story exploration game. Well, first, I suppose we should probably kind of set up the story of the game, which is actually the most important aspect of the game, as far as I'm concerned. How about this? We'll try and steal a page out of the Incomparables book and fire off a spoiler horn when we think we're approaching the true meat of the story.
That's fair.
So the first thing I'd say about the game is like the setup is that you play as Caitlin, who is a college-age girl. The year is 1995. It's the end of the summer. You finished a long study abroad program, so you've been away from your family for an entire year. And during that year, apparently you've barely talked to them because shit's been going down. Maybe they don't have phones in Europe at this time.
Well, you don't remember, Raygan, but it was very difficult to make a long-distance call at that point in time.
I don't really think I had any reason to make long-distance calls in 1995.
We didn't have the Skype.
Shane, you said that as if you had multiple years of experience beyond Raygan in long-distance calling.
You might not know this, but I am in fact the older brother.
Got it. Good. Now
by
I
approximately 5 minutes.
And for what it's worth, you do find a postcard in the game.
I need to interrupt because I like to say that while Shane may be the older in birth order, I was conceived first.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
you're coming home from your year abroad, and you're coming home to a house that your character, Caitlin, has never seen before, because during the year abroad, your family moved house from one place to another. An uncle in the family died and left the house to your family. And rather than sell it for the mansion that it was, like any reasonable person would have done, apparently they decided, for whatever reason, to move across the country and move into this mansion house. You're
Well, I
coming
do
home.
think they explore those reasons, but I don't think that we want to spoil anything for people.
It is
yeah.
beautiful house. It is large.
It's large and awesome. And
The house is definitely rendered in just loving detail in the game, and
Mhm.
every object that you come across inside the house is just so beautifully, lovingly rendered. From every like family photograph to every letter to every book or tape or old newspaper, it's all just so beautifully done.
And those objects are incredibly important because, as we haven't actually said yet, the very important aspect of the game is that when you come home, you find a note on the door from your sister who's left. Your sister has left you a note telling you that she's gone and not to look for her. And your mother and father are also gone. So there is no one home. The home is empty. Everyone has gone from the home. As the, I know. But the point being that, that it's sort of mysterious. When you're coming into the house, it has this feel, it's a dark and stormy night, literally, and there's this feel to the house of a kind of a creepy environment. I know that for me, going into the house and beginning the game, I knew very little about the game. Did anybody here have a concept of the story or the structure before you came into it?
Nope. If I had to make one suggestion, is that I wish I had a flashlight, because there are several dark and scary rooms, and a flashlight would have been beneficial. Though there are lights in almost every room, you just gotta find them. So a light switch would have been nice. And even though I knew it wasn't a monster game, I kept waiting for monsters.
Maybe in the DLC.
Yeah.
I think actually because of my years and years and years of being conditioned by games to expect ghosts or zombies or parallel dimensions or something, you confront this mystery, everyone is gone, and interesting parallel between that and the Stanley Parable, and you're trying to figure out why everyone is gone and why your house is empty. And even though I kind of had a feeling that it was a different kind of game, throughout the entire experience, I was continually expecting something gamey. But this game is not gamey.
I think they want you to think that, though.
Yeah.
There's enough, like, creaks and cracks, and there is, to a degree, a supernatural element, though you'll discover that as you play it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not monsters.
It is full of red herrings and misdirection.
Exactly.
There's so many things about it that try to, and I think that's totally intentional. They're trying to, they know that if you're playing this game, that you've played other video games, and they're trying to use that experience against you. They're subverting your expectations and doing really amazing things with it. There's so many things like, even just the cover of the game, the cover is gorgeous, and it's got this dark purple tone and this creepy old house. And you look at that and you think, haunted house game. I saw that and I thought, this is a game about a haunted house. And
it is haunted by memories.
By memories. And then there's so many
that
little
up
things.
too. I mean, the house is referred to as the Psycho House.
Absolutely.
So you're right. I mean, they want you to think these things are happening, even though you also know, like, I was basically, a lot of my playtime is thinking, I'm not going to be attacked. I'm not going to be attacked. I know I'm not going to be attacked. But the simple fact that I was thinking that is, I think, kind of what they were looking to accomplish. Is I was reassuring myself constantly that there was nothing to be worried about.
Yeah, they build a mood and a tension in a way that I've almost never seen before in a game. I don't think I've ever had such a over nothing but it's nothing but mood. It's like walking through a scary haunted house where there are no ghosts and there's nothing jumping out at you. It's all mood, but it's just brilliantly crafted.
If this is a game with gameplay, then the core gameplay mechanic is...
Hey, watch your if there, buddy.
I don't think it's a game. I don't.
All right.
But, and I'll defend that if I have to. But I do think that, like, if it's a game, the core mechanic is inspect an object, hear a journal entry. And there are games that have done this before. Like, this is a classic gameplay mechanic that it inherits from things like BioShock, right? So, as you walk around Rapture in BioShock, you're finding tape decks, and you're listening to people shrieking in pain as they're turned into a monster or something. But in Gone Home, you're walking around the house and you're picking up photographs and you're thinking to yourself about, a great time that you had with your father. And that's the core mechanic of this game.
Yeah, the mechanics of the game are nothing unique. You're right. It's a simple RPG that you're pointed forward and you have your cursor.
I'm
and
shocked
you
that you would
select.
describe it as an RPG.
Well, okay, that's not the right word, but a game from the point of view of a first-person character.
Okay.
If that works for you, with a single actionable move, which is pick up object.
Pick up objects, inspect objects.
Expect object. And then some objects, not by your decision, but some objects go into your backpack. Mm-hmm. And they are predetermined objects that go into your backpack. Mm-hmm. And there is crouch, and there is kind of zoom in to an extent. And for whatever reason, I kept trying to open up my bag, and I was crouching all the time. So if anybody was watching me play, it looked like a crazy person walking around their house, constantly ducking.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to play these games like the world's weirdest hoarder, grabbing every object and trying to carry it around.
I felt bad because one of the ways that I would ensure that I was keeping track of the things that I was doing is, since almost everything, any loose object is actionable, you can pick it up. I picked up everything and threw it on the ground. So I was wrecking the place. If you went in there after the fact, virtually everything was on the ground. But I'd be able to walk back into that room and immediately notice that I'd been in there before.
So in a way, you really were playing the part of the teenager.
Absolutely. I was angsty and destroying things.
I was the same in that I, in order to keep track of what rooms I had been in, I would turn on all of the lights in each room as I went and leave them on full blaze. I never turned off a light in the entire game.
Oh yeah, me neither.
What was so funny was there's a moment in the game where one of the parents makes reference to the fact that the main character never turns the lights off and wastes power.
Oh, it's on a corkboard in the wall.
Yeah.
Or there, it says something like, turn off, I'm sorry, what's the younger sister's name again? Sam, turn off the lights when when you leave the room, you're as bad as your sister.
Yeah.
That was great. There's so many little wonderful elements in the game. Even things like you'll pick up a random magazine and there'll be wonderful little elements on it. Like I remember one magazine had a cover with a cover story that said, "The Male Gaze, How to Subvert It."
Yeah, and you uncover a box of your father's gentleman's magazines, as they're called in the game. And every once in a while, normally when you pick up an item, it's just a little white dot that you kind of control. But sometimes on specific items, the only time you really hear from your character is, instead of the white dot, it'll be a little sentence as if that's what your character is thinking. Mm. And when you go over the gentleman's magazines, it'll be like, "Oh, gross, Dad," or something to that extent. And that's your only real interaction with the character that you're playing.
I did not discover any gentleman's magazines.
I was tearing everything apart.
Time for another playthrough.
I'm not gonna lie. I missed something at a key moment of discovery and basically tore the house apart looking for something. when in fact it had been a pretty easy thing that I should have seen in the first place.
Interesting.
But I found.
Can you share with us what that was without spoiling things for people who haven't played it yet?
At some point you find through the progression of the story, you find 2 half-torn note pieces of a locker combination.
Ah, yeah.
And for whatever reason, and it's not hidden, you're supposed to find it. The game kind of guides you along.
Let's talk
house.
about that, because that was something that I thought was really the most successful thing about the game, was how well it guides you through the path. Something that really struck me about it was that even though the game has really large open areas. First, when you first walk in the door, theoretically, you could walk up the stairs, you could walk to the left-ish wing. There are a number of doors you could open. You could go almost in any direction. Almost the entire house is open to you right from the start. And yet there is an order that you're supposed to go through things in. The journals are numbered, and you're clearly supposed to uncover the story in a particular order. And I don't know how I did it, but I just based on, not being particularly organized and kind of going at it as I thought kind of seemed best, I hit every single journal entry and I hit them all in exactly the prescribed order, which I thought was amazing.
I did the same, so it makes me wonder if there is an element of the game kind of reorganizes itself to kind of push you through properly. But I
don't think so, because I went back and played through it a second time, and every single object and item was in the same place.
I don't mean to say that the game like reshuffles, but rather that it doesn't, like, the initial steps don't matter which order you hit them, and that for it to still tell the story in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it kind of will reorder them as far as how they show up in your journal to kind of fit whatever way you went about it.
I don't agree.
It reminds me of good theme park design, and I'll always wind up making analogies between theme park design and video game design, because the idea of
Roller Coaster Tycoon, I guess.
Yes, but I think about places like Disney World, right, where as you walk in, you're face to face with a giant castle, and no matter which way you turn, it's the start of an experience, and that's been entirely designed for you. And in this game, it's guiding you into a story that you can approach in different ways, but no matter how you approach it, it feels like the right way, because all of the different elements that are open to you from the very beginning are the beginning of that story. And it introduces you to all the characters in that first area. It introduces you to their personalities. For example, like one of the first things I did was go down the hallway and start discovering the father's bizarre obsession with the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah. And
to me, that was one of the most interesting things. So I followed that until I couldn't follow it any longer, and I was distracted by something else in the family, And from there, it's the beauty of this quote unquote game is that it gives you the freedom to explore the story from any angle, but the fact that some doors are locked, that some objects are hidden, restricts your completion of those stories until you've explored certain elements. And so everyone's experience of the story is going to be unique, but that the different ways in which you reach kind of the crescendos of the story are all going to be essentially in a progression because of the physical structure of the design of the house.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if you were to start a fresh game, and this is easily testable, start a fresh game and immediately run to the item that triggered the opening of the door, of one of the doors, would it do it right out of the gates?
Yes, it would.
Would it?
I can tell you that just from having read a bit about it and also experimented with it a little bit. You can, for example, once you know where everything is, you can open the front door, walk right in, and end the game within under a minute. You can get
Okay,
to the
so-
last moment if you know where everything
So
is.
then my previous entire argument is moot, and you are correct. That answers well, and because that's what I was thinking, is that it kind of forces you, though you can go about it in different ways, it forces you to find them in certain order. If you can, in fact, walk in and immediately complete it, then I retract
every journal entry is actually tied to a particular object. It doesn't ever change what journal entry goes with what object. And also, everything that's discoverable in the game is discoverable from the very beginning, without the locked doors aside. But actually, structurally, if you don't need to unlock any of the doors in order to complete the game, you do if you're following the golden path. You're sort of actually completing collecting all the journal entries and experiencing the entire story. Then you're going to visit every square inch of the house probably multiple times. But if you finish the you can theoretically, not to spoil anything, but the game ends in the attic, which isn't easy to open. But there's definitely a way to walk right into the house and get into the attic and finish the game without actually experiencing any of the rest of the game.
Should have fired off the spoiler horn.
Fair enough. So I guess that's kind of shows off the good game design that you and myself, and I'm assuming most people who played the game, probably inadvertently followed a pretty similar path, even though we thought we were exploring it randomly, which actually will kind of tie in with the Stanley Parable to a degree.
Yeah, I thought that was the most accomplished thing about the game, was just how well designed the path was. I think they know how gamers play, and they know that if you're a gamer, you're probably going to walk into the house and you're going to look for certain types of things. You're going to look for the objects that seem most interactable and so on. I really think that they did a lot of thinking about that, and that's to me the most fascinating thing about the game. So do we want to kind of fire off the spoiler horn and talk? I'm totally stealing that phrase, by the way, from The Incomparable, which is a phenomenal podcast. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, you should go and do so immediately. I'm stealing their phrase. Are we okay to kind of dive into some of the more spoilery aspects of the game and talk about its emotional impact and some of the things about it that are difficult to talk about without spoiling aspects of the story?
I'm ready.
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I just can only contribute so much.
That's okay. We'll try not to spoil the worst of it for you.
Yeah, I'm the listening audience for
well,
part of this.
I would just have to say that it's a story unlike anything else that I've ever seen in a game. So obviously the story that you're exploring, even though you're playing as Caitlin, is you're exploring the story of the year that her younger sister spent discovering herself. More specifically, meeting a girl, discovering that she was a lesbian, falling in love with this girl. The girl's name is Lonnie, and she's actually really kind of, they just do a really wonderful job, as far as I'm concerned, of giving you characters to care about. And I don't know, I wondered if, I think this is where some people find themselves really loving the game and some don't. This is a kind of story that I think sort of just gets right to my heart. But I don't know if it does for everybody. What about you guys? As you could hear there, we had some microphone issues. Apologies for the sound quality. We stopped the call temporarily to troubleshoot and then picked up after we'd resolved the issues. So we were, before we got interrupted by mic issues. Am I still sounding okay?
Yeah,
Shane
you
was telling
sound
me
fine.
it sounded okay. Good.
You sound like honey poured over thunder.
Thank you. Man,
Like 1,000 honeys poured over thunder.
I am sweating. Oh my.
You're
So-
just saying that because you two sound the same.
We do. So we were talking about the story of Gone Home and how it affected us. I was just saying, I think that's probably the dividing line for people who really loved this game like I did, and for people who either didn't like this game or who just didn't connect with it. I think that it told a story that I've never seen before in a game. There have been games that featured romantic stories, but I've never seen a game that was, it's not exactly about a romance. it's about that horrible period in a teenager's life when you're, trying to become your own person, and it's a story we've seen before in a thousand other mediums. We've seen movies of stories so like this, but the way that we were exploring the story through her sister's eyes, experiencing the family. I don't know. I thought it was a really unique experience.
As having not finished it yet, unless the story makes some dramatic turn, I think I'm about 75% of the way through it, so it very well could. But it doesn't seem to me that the story itself is anything incredibly unique. Like you said, this is a pretty standard coming-of-age, teenage angst, early 90s riot girl kind of thing. It's more how it's presented that makes it so unique.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the tone of the experience is what makes it so unique. Because, like we were talking about it earlier, here I am listening to journals about my little sister's first kiss with her girlfriend. Meanwhile, thinking, am I going to be attacked while doing this? And but also knowing that I'm not going to be attacked while doing this. So you have all of those things layered on you at the same time, while in a beautifully rendered room with really nice, thunder and lightning and creaking wood and doors kind of slowly closing. It's all of that together that makes it such a unique experience, because none of the individual factors themselves are anything that unique,
Well, I will say it's not unique in all of entertainment, but I feel it is unique in video games. I don't think this is a story we've seen told. This sort of family storyline. If this were a typical video game, then we would find that, one of them was a spy or an alien, or that there was a zombie.
We'd walk in the room and the parents are hanging by a noose over the foyer.
In any other game, this would be the B plot, and the A plot would be something involving Shooty McShooty Man.
Yeah. That classic Shooty McShooty Man.
But this is the A plot. This is the lead story.
Yeah, I kept trying to find the fire button, but I tried every button on my keyboard and nothing happened.
Nothing made me shoot.
I just kept randomly crouching all the time.
You can throw small objects. There are occasional incidents where you can throw things. That's about it.
Actually, you can catch those things too. I spent a moment in one of the rooms. For whatever reason, once it dawned on me that it might be possible, I had a pillow that I would throw up and then go over and catch.
Emergent gameplay.
The designers set the rules. It's up to us to, explore them.
So the A plot is Sam's story, but there's a lot of sort of B plot as well, which is the story of the house itself and the uncle who lived there. The story of the dad and his relationship with his father and his writing career, and the dad's relationship with his wife, who is in turn having a relationship. Apparently the mom is considering or perhaps actively having an affair with someone from work.
Ranger Rick.
Ranger Rick. Oh my God, Ranger Rick. And all of her romance novels, my God. But yeah, the Sam and Lonnie story is the only one that's explored through actual journals. That's the one that we probably feel the most connected to because we hear Sam's voice. And as a side note, the voice acting in this game is phenomenal. I think that the girl doing the voice of Sam is terrific. She's pretty much the only voice we hear, but really spot on.
Yeah, and they do a good job of mixing it up too. We're pretty much learning all this through written stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of letters, but again, it's 1995, but there's also invoices for certain things and receipts for different things, and that kind of, you make your own assumption from it. It's not just you pick up a letter and it's, hi, I'm having an affair with this guy. It's a letter from a friend asking to hear a little bit more about the new ranger who they've been talking about so much and things like that. One thing that I noticed that I thought was pretty funny is they have a bar, and behind the bar in a box is where you find the letter from the publishing company saying that they're no longer going to be publishing the father's books. And the fact that it's behind the bar is funny to me, because you can just kind of imagine somebody there drinking heavily, reading and rereading their letter telling them they've essentially lost their job.
Mm-hmm. Every object in the game is evocative in that way, and it's always more than just what do you find, it's where and in what circumstance do you find it. There's a lot of situations like that. One that I can say you probably haven't gotten to, Nate, so I don't want to spoil anything too in-depth.
Don't worry about me individually.
Sure, and we've talked about spoilers. When you get towards the end of the game, and you know that the parents' relationship has been kind of apart, and in the early parts of the game, most of the things that belong to the parents you're finding are, you can tell that these are people that this is a relationship that isn't functioning properly. But then towards the end of the game, you start finding some of their things that seem to kind of indicate that they're getting back together, or not that they're getting back together, but that they're trying to repair their relationship. And the very last, one of the very last rooms that you enter in the game is a greenhouse, and you can see that the father has moved his typewriter out there into the greenhouse. And that kind of touched me, because you realize that he's moved it out there so that he can write near where his wife is working on her garden. And it's not an object that says, and they're feeling really good about things, they're repairing their relationship, they're being positive. It's more just environmental. You see,
you know that object is important to him, and that those objects are important to her, and what they say about their behavior in their daily life, and you don't have to find a letter that says, I love my husband again.
That's one of the things I liked best about the towards the end of the game, is that they do a wonderful job of kind of showing how the characters have changed. You think of when you walk into this house as, you're picking up what's in someone's life, and that seems like a static thing, but because you're exploring the house in stages, and you're seeing these objects and hearing these journal entries kind of in an order, there is an arc for all of the characters. It's kind of an interesting, it's fascinating that they're able to do an arc for these characters in the form of walking through all of these objects are in place before you ever walk in the front door of the house, and yet the story that it tells has an arc for every character.
Yeah, I think I think you might have already said it, but that's basically the game's biggest success. Is you seemingly randomly work your way through these stories, but each of them do have a perfect progression that you kind of stumble upon.
Yeah, you don't need to get a guide for this game. You can jump into it and have faith in the game designers that you are going to experience at least most of everything in the game in an order that's going to work and make sense for you. It's really a wonderful achievement.
And to kind of tie it all into the concept of the show, I'm at about 2.5 hours, and I would say about 20 minutes of that went away from me getting essentially lost. But again, I don't think most people will. I just, there's two things right next to each other, and I only looked at one of them, so it was mostly my fault on that one.
Speaking of the arc of the characters, I think if the game has one flaw for me to criticize, it is that Katie herself, the main character that you're playing, didn't really feel like a fully fleshed out character to me. She's come home from school, and she experiences all of these things. And I mean, in tried and true video game sense, she is an avatar for the player. Mm-hmm. But in that way, like, we don't have much in the way of indication of her reaction to any of these incredibly troubling and revealing things that she's finding out about her family in this very unusual and sometimes scary situation she finds herself in.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, basically, you're running around tearing apart the house, looking for clues, and there is very little distress coming from you. Those little quotes that pop up, or those little one-lines that pop up when you investigate particular objects. It never seemed to have any sort of stress behind them or real concern for anything. It's just like, oh, she had that in the 4th grade. Oh, Dad. Oh, Sam. Stuff like that. Nothing is really too stressful.
Well, I think that is sort of by design. I see that could be considered something negative about the game, but I feel like their choice was to make this, she's the Link in this Legend of Zelda. She's the silent protagonist that you as the player can project your emotions and your thoughts onto. And so I feel like in a way it's better this way. I think it's nice that we don't have, this game wouldn't work in a third person perspective with a person wandering around talking to themselves.
Yeah. And that's fair. They don't want to make assumptions for you.
Mm-hmm.
If she was running around behaving stressed, then you as the player would have to feel stressed. And it's not a particularly stressful environment to the player, though it probably would be for someone in real life who came home and their entire house was empty and
Well, a real person probably also wouldn't be concerned they're going to be attacked by a zombie.
That's a fine point. And also probably wouldn't open up every single drawer, throw everything onto the floor, and, run around in circles tossing a pillow in the air and catching it for a moment.
You don't live in my house.
I didn't toss everything onto the floor, you slob.
I threw virtually everything you can on the floor.
And you could throw a lot of things on the floor.
For what it's worth, there are sometimes things underneath other things that you discover. So
That's true.
It was partially because I found some sort of weird satisfaction in it, partially because of the game mechanics, and partially a way to help me keep track of each room.
Mm-hmm.
I emptied out the fridge, though. I was like, you open up the fridge, and it's full of stuff that you can move, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, if I can move this stuff, then maybe there's something in here that I need. And there's not. Spoilers. I took out everything from that fridge. Like, bottles of ketchup, like, vegetables. It's like, and the whole time I'm like, there's no way there's anything in this fridge. But I gotta know.
All of those useless objects are lovingly created in this game. You can pick up and move almost every household object that you can imagine, and almost none of them have any relevance to the story.
The vast majority of them that don't.
Mess making simulator.
Yeah.
It is.
Hey, and I think that's probably why, I said I'm at like 2.5 hours. I think if you started the game and you're like, I want to progress the story and I want to move through it in a pretty quick, logical path, you could probably finish this game in under 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at 2.5, but I have thrown everything everywhere and gotten lost. So
I completed the game right at 2 hours. Although I will say I'm pretty sure I examined every object, but I didn't. I was kind of OCD about putting them back, and most things I picked them up, I turned them over once to make sure that there wasn't anything written on them, and I put them exactly back where they had come from.
So we had incredibly different experiences.
Well, I didn't want to be messy.
That probably says a lot about our characters' difference.
There ought to be some stats at the end where they rank you on the mess you make.
Oh, that would be fascinating. Like The Walking Dead does.
Oh, do they?
Oh, they do. It's like, at the end of a chapter, they'll tell you, you and 30% of players decided to kill so-and-so. And it makes you think, am I a monster? I'm only in the 30% of players who decided to kill so-and-so. I actually think that more games should do that. I think it's a wonderful way to kind of, in a single player game, it's a wonderful way to kind of, make you think about other choices you could have made at the end. Maybe make you go back and try a new thing.
That's an interesting thing too, that it's hard to know where you stand with the rest of the video game playing world. Like, I ran into that a lot as like a kid. You'd play, I thought that I was the single greatest Super Smash Brothers player in the world because I could demolish everybody that I played with. So I was like, I'm probably one of the best.
Oh, that must have been so sad for you.
And it's just that you owned the system and they were visiting your house.
Well, I like to give myself a little bit more credit than that, but yeah, that probably played a part in it. But it is interesting to be able to take a single player game or a game that could only be played at your house with other people, and at least see some comparables between other people playing it.
That is, I think, why Twitch streaming is so interesting.
Yeah,
I'm not actually really a big on watching Twitch streams, but I actually see the appeal in this particular angle. It's like, if I think I'm okay at a game, I'm pretty sure I can go right onto that website and see somebody live right now playing that game better. And that's actually kind of interesting.
There's this girl. Her name is Lonnie. She gave me this tape and said, "You have got to listen to this."
Well, is there anything else we want to touch on with Gone Home?
Yeah, I'd like us to complete on Gone Home with maybe Raygan. You had put in some interesting things that I don't think I saw in the outline. I'd love to hear you talk about this Oscar plot that I don't think I really understood, and then I'd be happy to talk about, because I think it falls under interactive fiction. So I'd be.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. Well, so with the Oscar plot, and again, this is spoilers. Nate, have you been into the basement catacombs or basement passageways yet?
Catacombs?
I don't know if you
Yes.
call them catacombs. That's probably a stretch. But there's a lot of little, twisty little passageways in and around the house. And in the basement... so first off, Oscar is the name of the uncle that Terry, the dad, inherited the house from. And of all of the plots, it's probably the most difficult to figure out what's going on. So I guess actually I'm kind of interested. I know you're not done with the game, but it's not something you have to get done with the game to really explore. Nate, have you, on your playthrough, found much of the Oscar, dead Uncle Oscar's plotline?
Only that the Sam and Lonnie believe that he is haunting the house.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to contact him through a Ouija board, which they apparently successfully did. You find it, I found the note, or rather their game of Ouija,
Mm-hmm.
where Oscar responds to them. And,
I first of all think that is probably just teenagers playing around with a Ouija board. I don't think anyone is actually responding to them, because I think that's outside the world of the game.
I mean, that's the whole, if you believe that Ouija is real, is the first part of that. And then even if you do, whether that one would be a real response or not.
Yeah. But, Oscar, so the main place where you discover information about that plotline is a locked safe in the basement. And it's actually probably the trickiest thing in the game is getting into that safe. But what you learn before opening the safe is that, Oscar, didn't speak to the rest of his family, for many, many years, and it's not entirely clear why. He ran a drugstore in the town that they're in, but that drugstore closed down, and he essentially became some kind of a hermit. Like, he lived in his house, but spoke to no one, didn't speak to his family. That when Terry, the dad, was younger, he used to come to the house and visit as a kid. But then sometime in the 1960s, and if you look, it seems to be right around the time of the assassination of President Kennedy, which it clearly plays a big part in Terry's life. Right around that time, he stopped coming. He stopped going to the house. And you can tell that because in the basement, there's a height chart. First of all, it's kind of creepy that it's in the basement, but whatever. In the basement, there's one of these things where kids mark their height against a wall. And Terry's heights are marked there with dates leading right up until whatever date that would be in the 1960s, and then they stop. So without getting into the safe, you can tell that something kind of strange there happened. It was that in the 60s, Uncle Oscar and Terry's father, whose name I don't know if we learn or don't remember, got on well enough to go and visit each other along with Terry the kid. But that sometime around the time of the Kennedy assassination, all of that stopped and, Uncle Oscar stopped talking to his family. If you get into the safe, you discover some interesting objects, including, a bottle of I think it's a couple of full bottles of morphine, and a letter from Uncle Oscar to his sister, which would be Terry's, aunt, where she had written to him, and I don't recall the exact wording, but long story short, he wrote this slightly obscure letter saying that he wasn't going, he wasn't going to speak to them anymore, and that he had closed down the drugstore because of temptation. So there's sort of two competing theories, if you will, about what's going on with Oscar. And there's the really gross one, and there's the one that I believe that is less gross. Some people on the internet have expressed a theory that Oscar, and I think actually if you don't get into the safe, it's much easier to believe this, that Oscar molested Terry. And that event happened leading up to the 1960s. And that it was in the 60s when this all happened, and around the time of the president being assassinated, it was all discovered, and that was why they didn't speak anymore, was that Terry had been molested. And that's never explicitly said, but in a way it kind of makes sense if you look at the aspect of, that they went away, that Terry kind of became a recluse, that the kids stopped visiting at that time because that's when they stopped marking it on the wall. And there's other creepy things in the basement, like there's some toys in the basement. There's these markings on the wall in the basement. Was Uncle Oscar bringing the little kids down into the basement to molest them? And was that why he was marking their height on the wall down there?
Well, why else would you take a child to a basement?
Well, it is kind of creepy. That's a creepy basement. Well, anyway. But actually what I think is much more likely is that he was a drug addict. That Terry locked that morphine in his safe to keep himself from using it. That he closed his drugstore to keep himself from accessing the morphine. And that his drug addiction had ruined his life to the point where he felt he couldn't relate to his family anymore and he stopped seeing them. Or that his sister, now that I think about it, I'm having a hard time remembering whether the letter was him rejecting his sister or his sister rejecting him. But in any case, I lean towards the side of it being Uncle Oscar was a drug addict who died alone and rejected by his family, and not that Uncle Oscar was a child molester who died alone and rejected by his family. Both so uplifting.
The former there seems to fit more within the tone of the story. I think probably a molester who has died is probably a little heavier than they're looking for, but
I don't know. It's a pretty heavy story. I would find. I mean, I don't see it's completely impossible that that's the case, but it doesn't strike me as the most likely in this case. But I think it's a reasonable theory. I don't see it in this case. Yeah. But I thought it was really interesting that story was much more open to interpretation and much more difficult to unravel than the rest of the story, because you really have to dig. You have to find that safe. You have to open it. You have to have seen a lot of other stuff as well, like notice the height chart against the wall and a lot of other things. So there's a lot to it. I thought that was one of the little rewards of the game was unraveling that much more hidden plot. And I know many people play through the whole game without really finding that stuff.
Yeah, I went through the basement and I did not notice that, height chart. The height chart. I did not notice that. So.
It's near the safe, so you may actually not be able to get to that area yet.
I've seen the safe.
Oh, okay.
But that's it. So.
And there's a creepy little horse toy on wheels down there as well. One of the creepiest moments in the game was like that horse toy kind of moves. I think you kick it or something, but I don't know, and it just sort of moves. And that was like the creepiest moment in the entire game. Any other stuff to talk about with the plot?
The only other thing that kind of came to my mind while we've been talking, and this is very minor, but it was kind of fun to see the story of Allegra, which is pretty funny. It's super minor. It's like a D plot, if anything. But Sam, the sister that you're kind of exploring, is also a creative writer, like her father, and has this story about kind of an explorer named Allegra, and you find a like story, like a children's drawing of Allegra. You kind of follow Allegra just like you follow everything else. You find like 5 or 6 different stories written by Sam from ages like 4 all the way up until her current age. And it's just kind of interesting to read how she kind of progresses as a writer.
That was great. And my favorite aspect of those stories was the fact that Allegra's first mate in the early stories is a man. And then as she's starting to discover these things about herself, she has the first mate fall into a vat that turns the first mate female.
Yep.
That was really amusing to me. And actually, I think that happens slightly before she's really realized or really like put together her sexuality.
Yeah, on the timeline of her as a person, yes. As you as the player, you already know that she's learned that about herself. But yeah, It's pretty funny.
What a great multi-level game. I think everything about this game's story grabbed me, and I got really deeply involved with the characters and the plot. So that was
Raygan,
probably my favorite thing about the game.
Would you say that you were a fan of this game?
I would say that I am an unabashed fan of this game. I loved everything about it.
I hadn't quite picked that up yet.
Raygan, when the DLC comes out and you can get the zombie mode, will you buy it?
Oh, without question.
Okay. So, I wanted to say a few things about the game. I know I'm going to catch a little flack from Raygan on this, but I did not feel like this game had the key element of a game, which is challenge. I wasn't challenged by this game. It's interesting to me that this is even being described as a game. It's only described that way, I believe, because there's no other good category for this form of entertainment. No other good way to describe it. Interactive fiction comes close, but I don't think that you can really pigeonhole it in that way. The first time I've ever had something that was truly story front and center and other elements far, far behind, that still had the trappings of something that was first person, quote unquote shooter, in terms of controls and in terms of your interaction with it. So, that was truly unique for me.
I see where you're coming from. So, I disagree, but not in a serious way. Like, I certainly recognize that this game lacks a challenge aspect. And I think if you define a game as a interactive experience that challenges the player, then certainly, this fails that test. But then I feel you're kind of constructing the test just to exclude this game. Gone Home features a story and gameplay. Its gameplay mechanic may be simply picking up objects and investigating them, but I don't think that challenge is the thing that defines a game or separates games from whatever else you think this might be called. But I certainly think you have a valid point.
To me, it seemed like a mystery game. And I know that's not exactly right because we're not really puzzling anything. But we've been sitting here talking the entire time about the dots that you connect. And that, to me, is the gameplay, is trying to figure out what's going on. And though the clues are handed to you, essentially, you're still the one deducing it and coming up with what exactly happened.
So what you're saying is the game is in your mind.
Exactly. So it's not necessarily challenging.
Well, I don't
But-
know. I think in some ways that it does have challenge. The challenge is asking the player to look at a bunch of junk and figure out what happened, to tell themselves a story based on a bunch of junk.
I understand. I think interactive fiction is a very good way to describe it, but I was thinking about stuff way too much for it to be like a fiction, but interactive fiction. I was trying to figure out way too much for me to consider it interactive fiction.
Yeah, this is no choose your own adventure. And in fact, there is no choice to be made. Apart from choosing, like, I'll explore this room and then this room, or I'll pick up this object and not that object. There's no meaningful choices to be made. There's no branches to the plot. It's an investigation. And I think it absolutely is a game, but that it is a game of trying to stay one step ahead of the story that you're unraveling.
It definitely succeeded in its aims of making me care about the characters, and the key thing that makes a game it did have, which is that you felt motivated to continue. You had that motivation to continue with it. Something is a game to me primarily because it's enjoyable and it's played. So it had that definitely, but is it a video game in the traditional sense? Obviously not. Does it conform? It was a very strange hybrid of fiction and gameplay, with so many of the elements that I would typically expect from a game stripped away, that I just feel strange calling it a game at all.
All right. Well, fair.
And I think that's what they're trying to accomplish, though. So,
Huge success.
Whether a game or not, it is a huge success.
yeah, exactly. Like, I think if you ask them, is this a game? It would not surprise me if their response is, what do you think?
Yeah.
I think that's probably what they were trying to accomplish. So.
Well, awesome. So I feel like we've pretty thoroughly plumbed the depths of the game, Gone Home. And I will continue to use
What are we, 2 hours in?
I think we probably are. And so I think we may need to save the Stanley Parable for another episode. So I think this was a really interesting game, and I'm really glad you guys got a chance to play it and that we could all discuss it together. I really hope more people get to play this game. I know it's been a big success. It's been on a lot of lists. It's sold a lot of copies, which is great for a game that is, I think it's going to give hope to other game designers who might want to tell these same kinds of stories or create these same kind of experiences. A big commercial success like Gone Home, working with a small budget and creating this really successful thing. I think I hope we see more of these, and I think that we're going to. So I'm really glad we got to get together and talk about this game, and we're probably going to do another one of these soon and talk about the Stanley Parable, another game that has a lot in common and so much different from Gone Home. A really amazing game. So I hope you'll join us for that episode as well, coming up.
I have to say, the Stanley Parable, I really, really have enjoyed Gone Home. Absolutely. I'm on the side of it. Would recommend it to friends, but the Stanley Parable is probably instantly became one of my more favorite games. So.
Absolutely. In the Stanley Parable, Gone Home, I would recommend to anybody. The Stanley Parable, if you're a gamer and you don't play the Stanley Parable, you're no longer my friend.
I had all of my roommates do one run through of the Stanley Parable just to see what everybody did on their one run through, and it was pretty interesting. We'll talk about that next time.
All right. Consider that a teaser, gentlemen.
I'm teased.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you want to check out the show notes where we're going to have all the links to all the things we've discussed in the episode today, you can find those at theshortgame.net. Also, please follow us on Twitter, where we will be tweeting irregularly about nothing. We are @_shortgame. I was Raygan Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at RayganK, spelled R-A-Y-G-A-N-K. Shane is...
At 8-Bit Shane.
And Nate.
My personal Twitter is at NateSTL, though I'd be lying if I said I really contributed to it. You can follow me at my band's Twitter, which is, I kind of am the chief behind that, at Bearhive, Bearhive.
Nate's in a band.
Yes. And
Awesome.
I'm not super, I have a hard time buying into, like, an extreme social media, so, I use my band one as my personal one because I cannot commit to two Twitter feeds. So I use my band one as my primary one.
Well,
And-
Nate, I understand because my Twitter feed is basically 65% pictures of cocktails.
Well, if you want to send us feedback, the best way to do that would be on Twitter @_shortgame, and we'd be happy to hear from you, and any feedback or anything you'd like us to talk about in a future episode, we want to hear from you. So thanks so much for joining us, and this was the first inaugural episode of The Short Game.